Hello everyone, Mr. Lipchick here, and our topic for this segment of instruction will be the constitutional powers of the U.S. Congress. Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 to 18 list the express or enumerated powers of Congress in the Constitution. Clause 18 gives Congress implied powers beyond the first 17 clauses. It is what is called the Necessary and Proper Clause, which allows Congress to pass laws in support of its exercise of its expressed powers. It is also called the Elastic Clause because it has allowed Congress to expand its powers to meet the needs of a growing nation. The Necessary and Proper Clause of the Constitution has been subject to debate. Strict constructionists believe in a limited interpretation of the Necessary and Proper Clause. Loose constructionists believe in a loose or freer interpretation of the Necessary and Proper Clause. In McCulloch versus Maryland, the Supreme Court upheld the right of Congress to create the Second National Bank. On the Necessary and Proper Clause, it ruled, if it does not enlarge, it cannot be construed to restrain the powers of Congress. So in other words, it can be exercised but not to expand Congress's powers, just to assist Congress in the powers that it does have. Powers that are denied to Congress. Congress may not suspend a writ of habeas corpus, which is a court order to release a person accused of a crime to court to determine whether he or she has been illegally detained. Congress cannot pass bills of attainder, which are laws that establish the guilt of people without a trial. And Congress cannot pass ex post facto laws, making crimes of acts which were legal before the laws were passed. And there are several others denied in Article 1, Section 9. Legislative powers of Congress. Congress has the power to tax and spend, often called the power of the purse. No government agency may spend money without congressional authorization. An example that illustrates this would be the Iran-Contra scandal. Article 1, Section 7 says all bills for raising revenue shall begin in the House of Representatives. What happened in the Iran-Contra scandal was that weapons were secretly sold to Iran and the money used to fund the Nicaraguan Contra rebels, which the Congress had voted against funding. Larger states influenced the language of the Constitution because they wanted greater influence over taxation than the smaller states, and that is why the spending bills all originate in the House. Appropriations bills. These are laws that authorize the spending of money, and they must begin in Congress. Usually, they're created in response to requests from the executive branch, although Congress has used this power to create national policy. Other monetary powers of Congress. They can borrow money by issuing notes and bonds. They can maintain a national debt. They have the power to coin money and to regulate its value, and the power to punish counterfeiters. They can make laws concerning bankruptcy. Congress also has the power to regulate commerce, that is, business affairs. They have the power to regulate the buying and selling, interstate and international. So interstate buying and selling that takes place at an interstate or international level can be regulated by Congress. Congress has used this power to attack issues such as civil rights and racketeering, which is gangsterism. Foreign policy powers. They can approve treaties, declare war, create and maintain an army and navy, and make rules governing land and naval forces. They can regulate foreign commerce. Congress shares foreign policy and national defense powers with the President. Congress has only declared war 5 times. Military force, however, has been used on foreign powers more than 200 times in our nation's history. If you look to the right, you'll see a picture of 3 North Vietnamese patrol boats that were supposedly fired on the USS Maddox in 1964, and President Johnson used this event to get Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which allowed him to commit troops and to bomb North Vietnam. It basically gave him unrestrained powers to wage war in Vietnam. After the Vietnam War, Congress passed the War Powers Act of 1973. It forbids the President to commit American forces to combat for more than 60 days without congressional notification within 48 hours. Presidents have argued that this law is unconstitutional, but have complied with it for the most part. Laws pertaining to national growth, rules for becoming citizens, rules governing territories and possessions, other legislative powers held by Congress include the right to regulate patents and copyrights, and to establish federal courts and post offices. Non-legislative powers of Congress: the power to choose a president. At a joint session of Congress takes place to count the electoral votes after a presidential election. If no candidate has a majority, the House chooses the president from the 3 candidates with the most electoral votes. Each state's House delegation has 1 vote. If no candidate has a majority, the Senate chooses the vice president from the 2 candidates with the most electoral votes. He or she is chosen by majority vote, and this has happened only twice in the history of the U.S. Richard M. Johnson being the only vice president elected by the Senate. Non-legislative powers continued. The 20th and 25th Amendments to the Constitution give Congress the power to settle problems arising from the death, incapacity, or resignation of presidents. The 25th Amendment provides for the appointment of a vice president by the president if the office becomes vacant. And they must be approved by both houses of Congress. President William Henry Harrison died after only 2 weeks in office, leading the vice president to become the successor. Impeachment. Congress can remove the president or other high officials by impeachment. Charges are raised by a 2/3 vote in Congress, in the House. The individual receives a Senate trial presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The Senate must vote to impeach by 2/3. Only 2 presidents, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, had their cases go to the Senate for impeachment, and neither was impeached. Richard Nixon resigned before being impeached. It was very likely that he would have been impeached had he not resigned. Ratification, treaties. Article 2, Section 2 gives the Senate the exclusive power to ratify treaties negotiated between the U.S. and other nations. The Senate has rejected treaties such as SALT II, the Strategic Arm Limitations Treaty. In recent years, however, presidents have bypassed the treaty process with executive agreements. Amendment power. All amendments begin in Congress. And states have approved 27 and only rejected 6 of those amendments. That concludes our discussion on the constitutional powers of Congress. Thank you for viewing, and I look forward to seeing you in the live lesson. Have a great day.